Just
There we go.
I'm going to do it from the front, from this end, just to make sure we've got our bases covered. Sorry, everybody. Welcome to session 21. Cha-cha-cha changes, embracing inevitable change in the workplace. Please use the Q&A feature to post questions to the panel. I will relay those questions to the panelists to close out the session. The presenters for the session are Margaret Turman Kidd and Crystal Carpenter from Virginia Commonwealth University and Anastasia Rousseau from Arcadia University. And the first up is Anastasia.
Okay. You know what? I'm just realizing I have to go back to the beginning. I looked at this earlier and left my slideshow at the end. So welcome, everybody. I'm Anastasia Rousseau. I have worked in archives and libraries and museums for about 30 years. So I definitely have a lot of experience with different changes in the workplace for a variety of reasons. And this, I think in, today's age, this is a very timely conversation with everything that's going on and changes to digitization and that type of thing in archives as well. So my theme is change. It's not as scary as it sounds. So the changes to people's roles can vary, right? There's a lot of different reasons why something might change. There can be staff changes where opportunities open up. Someone is hired and you're now working under a new person and they want to change the way things are done. Or someone is fired and you have to take on new responsibilities. Or suddenly you have volunteers that you need to manage and figure out what to do with these volunteers, the best way to use them. And, that can change your role some as well. Also new interests where you're working in a job, but your interests change or they're piqued by your role. So this is a picture of, a conservation lab. And I've had experience with that as well, where we were working on something and realized that we needed to conserve a particular object, ended up at a conservation lab and realized, wow, that's a pretty cool thing. And then ended up taking some seminars and webinars on conservation. Or company changes where opportunities open up related to changes in the organization. For instance, a new program is started at your archive or library, or grant money is, given to you and you have to now work on that grant and figure out how to distribute the grant money and the best way to work with that. Or a new site, I mean, which would be wonderful, right? Wouldn't we all like that? A new addition to the archive that you can now work on or manage or work with other people on. And last one I like to mention is experience, because for me, you always want to get more experience. I always do, and take advantage of changes in your position because if you stay there, that's great. Then you know more. And if you leave, then you have that experience to take with you. So those are the four things I'm gonna go over briefly. And I say change good or bad in parentheses, because I'm not a believer that any change is really bad. They all bring up new experiences. These experiences lead to new learning opportunities. You learn about yourself, right? Your interests or abilities, some that you may not known that you had. You learn new materials or skills along the way. And the key really is to embrace the change, especially if it's put upon you or thrust upon you. It's going to happen whether you want it to or not, right? So my experience has been take advantage of it and don't be afraid of it. So staff changes. For me, one of my first jobs was working part-time as an assistant curator of a small museum in Key West. And here's a picture of the outside of that museum. And I was in my early 20s. I was working there part-time. And after about 9 months, they fired the curator. And they came to me and asked me if I wanted the job. Well, I thought, I don't know if I can do this job. And I really had to step back and assess the situation. And I realized I did know how to do the job. I'd been basically doing the job for 9 months, which is one of the reasons they fired the curator, because I was doing a lot of her work and she was pushing things off on me. So it gave me a chance to challenge myself. And I definitely made some mistakes, but I learned so much. And, the same thing will apply in an archive. At the university, at Arcadia University, our exhibition director retired, and he'd been working on a preservation grant to digitize and preserve parts of this processed collection. But that was not part of my role at all, grant writing. And I was interested in assisting them, but I definitely had to set some boundaries, right? Because, what I was willing to do, how much work I could take on, and what parts of the work I wanted to do. So another thing is, don't be afraid to speak your mind. Do not be afraid to say no if what the people are asking is truly too much. So I worked with them and kind of said, yes, I want to do this part of it. No, I don't want to do that. And it worked out fantastic. But sit back and kind of think about these things as something changes, as you get new staff or new volunteers, and decide how you want to proceed. And new interests. So, like I said, I was hired to process a very large collection. These pictures here are just a few of the entire room that was full of boxes and crates and plastic totes of materials that I was given 2 years to process. We had to process down to the folder level and create a finding aid for them and put them, of course, in archival boxes and folders. And I was working as a solo archivist, so it was quite a task. And so I started doing it and realized pretty quickly that I needed some help. So I was at a university, so I decided that to look for assistants, and I ended up hiring 2 student workers. And this was one of my student workers, Bryn. She was fabulous, and found she was an English major, but I'd posted it on the website for the university, and she got in touch with me and ended up finding out she was very interested in archives. And then I ended up with an apprentice as well, who worked with me almost every day during the spring semester to help me start processing this huge collection. And I found out that I loved working with and mentoring these college students. It was an interest I'd never anticipated. I had taught some, seminars and webinars, but I'd never really taught a class before. And I loved it. So that's when I started looking into teaching a course at the university. So like I said, these new interests, they equal new opportunities, right? I'd never taught at a university, like I said. I had no idea how to write a syllabus or write lesson plans. And it was a little daunting at first. I thought, gosh, I don't know. What if I can't do this? So I talked to some of my colleagues for help and advice, and they were great, giving me, some information. And then I found, which is wonderful, a lot of open source lesson plans. So for any of you that are looking to teach something, anything really, there are a lot of open sources out there that are free and easy to find on the internet, and there's lesson plans and different things that you can find. So I found some lesson plans for archival classes. I selected portions of them that I liked. And then I talked to the students. So this is a group of students that came in to do a specific project in our archive, in that photo there. But in working with the students that were working for me and students that came into the archives, I found out what they were most interested in. So the syllabus and the lesson plan came together really well based on things I found online, based on working with the students. And the next thing I knew, I was an adjunct professor. And who would have known it? That was something that definitely was not on my radar at all when I started that job. And then company changes. So right around the time this was all happening, the university started a new program. They wanted to offer a major in arts administration. And with that, they wanted more courses and more instructors. So I'd already expressed this interest in offering an archival studies course. And Arcadia is a small university, so I'd made a point to meet a lot of my colleagues. And so they started reaching out to me and said, oh, I heard you wanted to teach this. And we started this discussion, and they asked if I wanted to run my course under their new major, which made it a lot easier, because if you're not running it under a specific major that the advisors are putting out there to students, you have to advertise it yourself, and it's just an elective, and you're trying to get students to take it. But they're actually using it as part of this major, and it qualifies, towards credits towards their degree. So it worked out really well. And then experience. So I am a lifelong learner, and I don't know if any of you are as well, but honestly, I would keep going to college and taking courses if I could afford it and if I had the time. But I've found, Merrick has these, Society of American Archivists. A lot of places have these free or low-cost webinars that are fantastic. So I've gone online. I had to do this large digitization project many years ago, and I wasn't really sure, how to do that. And I found a webinar and I watched it and learned how to do that. And then I actually got a certificate to, digitize items, and it was great. And I've used that so much going forward. So never pass up those opportunities to learn something new and expand your knowledge base. And in my experience, archives are a perfect place to learn new skills, right? There's so many aspects to archival work: processing, conservation, exhibitions, which was my original background. My original master's degree was in museum exhibit design, but it has lent itself very well to archives because often you need to exhibit what is in your archive, right? Oral histories, research, digitization, grant writing, and teaching. So there's so many parts to archives. When people who aren't in the archival world ask me what I do, it's sort of hard to pin down, right? I'm sure the rest of you have had this experience as well. So I can say in my role as project archivist at the university, which started out with a very specific job description, it ended up encompassing all of the tasks that I just listed. One of the professors wanted to do an oral history project and reached out to me. So we worked on that together, and that went really well. I didn't have to take on some of the parts of this job, and I could have said no. I was very fortunate to have a supervisor and colleagues that were fully supportive of my choices. They basically said, Anastasia, if you want to do this, great. If you don't have to. They did originally ask me to teach the course, and it was supposed to be a 4-credit apprenticeship, which was a 200-hour apprenticeship. And I did turn that down. I said, no, I can't do that. I said, I'll do a 100-hour apprenticeship. I just don't have time, that much time to give to someone. And it worked out great. It was fine. I found somebody, and that student was fantastic. So again, you have to set your boundaries when these changes come up or these opportunities present themselves, and stand back and reflect on it and see what you think that you can reasonably do. So I chose how I wanted my role to expand. I had done many of these things in previous jobs, a little bit, but it's never quite the same, as we all know, right? All archives are unique. And so all learning experiences are unique as well. Excuse me. So if you stay in that role for years, you've now made yourself more or less indispensable, right? Because you know all this information. You know how to do more. If you decide to leave, you take these skills with you, so you're more marketable to other employers. So it's a win-win. If you're learning these new things and accepting these changes and moving forward with this, you really can't lose, I've found. Pardon me. So again, my mantra here is embrace the change, because change equals opportunity. No matter which direction you go, like this sign shows, you're learning something, right? If you're staying where you are and taking a little detour and in the same role that you're in and adding new tasks and adding new things to that, you're going to learn something, and it's going to present new opportunities. If you leave where you are and go to a different job, you'll definitely have more opportunities. But just don't be afraid to embrace any change that comes forward. And sometimes it's hard. If someone new comes and you have a hard time working with them, you really have to sit and think about it and how you're going to deal with that. But in my experience, most of the changes that I've had in my career, even jobs that I had to leave because they just weren't working out, something else came up. And I've always managed to find the good in that change. So that's my spiel for today. There are going to be 2 other presenters coming up to talk a little bit more about this in a specific way. But, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end if anyone has any questions. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.
All right, everybody. Share my screen. And hello, and welcome to Changes, Embracing Inevitable Change in the Workplace. Just to give you a quick overview, Crystal and I are going to give you a quick introduction of ourselves, tell you who we are, review the changes that have happened in our department over the last several years, and then we will discuss how we have and are navigating the changes. And then there will be time after the presentation to have a Q&A session. So first, who we are. I'll go ahead and start, and then Crystal, I'll throw it over to you. I am Margaret Terman Kidd. I have been in archives and libraries since 2005. I began at VCU in 2010 in a temporary project archivist position, which fortunately turned into a permanent position. I describe myself as a little more of a reluctant leader. I recently described myself to Crystal as her consigliere. So if you've ever watched the Godfather movies, you might know about that. I like mentoring and helping others. I never really saw myself as a supervisor or manager. However, as opportunities came up, I decided to take a chance. And I appreciate Crystal has given me opportunities, and she and I and the rest of the department have worked together to navigate some major changes. And just so you're not confused, obviously we use the Bowie song Changes, and Crystal and I thought we would share our favorite Bowies and why I love all stages and eras of Bowie. I have to go back to my first love, David Bowie in Labyrinth. And now I'll let Crystal introduce herself.
And I'm Crystal Carpenter. I'm the Elvis version of David Bowie here because, as folks may know, in some spaces I am obsessed. But anyway, so I'm Crystal, and I've been a professional in the archives and libraries world since 2003. The first 3 years of my career were temporary funded positions as well. And, I've been really fortunate to work in various types of organizations, different sizes, missions, private, public, historical societies, research institutions, academic libraries. And so my first supervisory role actually came with my first permanent position, where I started supervising students and interns, and then quickly thereafter, full-time employees. And as I gained more experience as an archivist, more supervisory responsibilities came with it. I bet that sounds familiar to many people. And while originally I didn't join the profession to be a manager or leader, as like Margaret mentioned as well, I found myself advocating for policies and changes and people more and more. And I really found that I found a lot of joy and purpose in doing that. And so I deliberately started to seek out those roles and professional development to support that more purposefully. So it led me here to VCU Libraries as the head of special collections, which I've been a part of since 2022.
All right, so now we're going to go to our department overview and how things started. So to begin, we thought it'd be useful before we get into everything to show you where we started, what we looked like before the changes that we're about to discuss occurred. Just for a little extra background, we have 2 campuses, the Monroe Park campus, where the James Branch Cabell Library is located, and that's where Crystal's office is, and I am on the MCV campus, the medical campus, and we had, at this time in 2018, we were actually 2 separate departments. And since about 2012, the 2 special collections departments had worked jointly in what our 2 department heads at the time called a merge without merging. So what this meant in practice is that while the departments were distinct and had their own department heads and were in their own divisions within the library, we still worked together, we shared resources and knowledge, we created policies, procedures, and workflows that were shared by both departments. So for instance, we got our first content management system, our archivist toolkit, and then we moved into archive space. We used to have regular joint meetings. We would go between libraries to assist each other. And you can see that a lot of this was done with an eye toward future merging of the two departments. And if you look at this kind of flow or organizational chart that I've done, you can see what kind of positions we had and where they were. And to make it even more interconnected, to the folks who were in the Cabell Library Special Collections actually reported to people at HSL. I was one of those people that had someone reporting to them, our temporary processing archivist. But you can see how interconnected we were. And as the Access and Electronic Records archivist, I did a lot of work on both campuses, both with regular collections, but also with our Born Digital materials. And then my supervisor, the head of the HSL department, was also the university archivist. And so she handled university archives between both campuses. So now we're going to move on to our rapid fire change. So between 2019 and 2024, we had a host of changes that took place in special collections and archives. And you'll notice that I didn't even put COVID on here, but I have to mention it because, of course, that was a huge thing that everyone had to deal with in addition to everything else that was happening. So our first changes started in 2019. Our department head at Cabell Libraries left after 7 years, and our assistant department head became the interim of that department. And then our accessioning and processing archivist also left. And then, of course, COVID happened, and then we jumped to 2021, and we had some major changes that happened. We got a new library dean. Our previous dean had been there for 21 years. So again, very stable time period. And now suddenly we have this new dean. We're still in COVID. And the two departments, the new dean, when they came in, decided to, yes, we will go ahead and do this merger. And then on top of that, we had a staff member, our senior research associate, who had been there for 31 years, retired. So that was a whole lot of things happening all at once. And then it ramped into overdrive by 2022. We had another long-time employee retire, or actually two, one with 25 years of experience and one with 17. And then our teaching and learning librarian left. And in that time, we managed to finally hire a new processing archivist, because that position ended up being vacant for a little over 3 years. And we hired 3 new staff to replace the ones that had left. And then, of course, we got Crystal, who joined us as the department head for the newly merged departments. And then in 2023, our longest tenured person in the department retired. That was my former supervisor. She had been a department head and the university archivist, and then served as the interim department head for the newly merged department before Crystal joined. And then our senior curator, who had formerly been the assistant department head and interim head at JBC, left for a new position. And then we were finally able to hire a full-time university archivist, which was a nice win. And I was promoted to senior curator for health sciences. We also hired a new arts collection curator in 2024. And we had a delightful few weeks of being fully staffed, with the exception of our hourly position, which I didn't even add in here because that's always a revolving door. And just when we thought we were off the hiring merry-go-round, our research and collection specialist departed for a faculty position at William & Mary, which we are super excited about because we always knew that he was going to go on to something else. But again, we're very sad for us, because that means yet another position that we have to fill. And then also, since I just made this slide, we have another person who is also leaving in a staff position. So this is what we look like currently. And I don't have red around the other staff positions leaving because I didn't update my slide. But as you can see, this is a little more streamlined, having us all in one department. But it's very visually start to see that there are only 2 people who have been here since before 2022. That is myself. I've been here for 14 years, and then our collection archivist, who has been here since 2014. And so since 2019, we have lost 160 years of institutional memory, and 139 of that was from the departure of 5 people. We went from having multiple folks with decades of experience to now we're the longest serving department members, as I said, have only been here for 14 and 10 years respectively, and then dealing with a pandemic, a new dean, and a merger. So even if we'd only experienced a few of these changes, that would have been a challenge. But this amount of change is just on a whole different scale. And of course, one thing though that makes this easier in some respects is that with having so many new folks, they have not all experienced this massive change. They've just experienced the change in coming into a new position. And of course, with this level of change comes the opportunity to really reshape the department and take it in a different direction than what we have been doing in the past. And that's actually pretty exciting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Crystal. I will interject here and there, but for the most part, she's going to be taking the reins for the remainder.
Thank you, Margaret. So we're going to talk a little bit about rebuilding and approaches. So as Margaret shared, there's been some profound change in the department over the last few years, and it's been emotionally and culturally destabilizing for everybody. And so I want to give some tips and strategies and use VCU as a case study for navigating this change. And to frame this rebuilding and approaches, I really feel like I should give a little bit more background into my leadership. And so like I mentioned before, if you're like me, formal management or leadership training was something I had to seek out or build on my own through professional development. When it came to the on-the-job training, it was always guided by what my instincts told me by forming my own peer mentorship space when able. Work friends are the best. Work colleagues at current institutions, other institutions have been instrumental. And also, you know, I've been shaped by the experience and what I've seen in other leaders, the good, the bad, and the not so pretty. Many of the approaches and things outlined here are based on the practice of management and leadership, not really the theory. But of course, with that said, there are many resources and tools out there that discuss management theories and approaches like relationship management, for example. And I'll say that these approaches have helped me navigate being a leader and have helped give me a path for continual improvement. And really, this is what the basis of this presentation is about for us, I think, is learning how to do the best, to be the best for yourself, for your team, and that there's continual change all the time, sometimes rapid and off the charts, like what's experienced here in some ways, and then more subtle. And so I wanted to say, you know, growth and change go hand in hand. And then lastly, at the core, I think of myself as a human-centric leader. So creating a culture of trust and care and belonging within an organization is top priority for me. And a step I take in fostering this environment is by building meaningful relationships. Next slide. So thinking back to this VCU context and all the change, and myself being new to the team, a critical first step in rebuilding and moving forward successfully was focused on intentional relationship building. And here are some components we put into practice. And some of these obviously were here prior to my coming. And we're really fortunate that there was that merger without merger beforehand that really did help lay the groundwork for a lot of this as well. And I have a really great team of folks. So all of that made a tremendous impact. But I want to note that we are primarily in person, but we do flex. Every day is a little bit different with remote work or in-person work. So all of these things are done in different ways, whether it's in person, on Zoom, that kind of thing. So we did our one-on-one meetings. It was really important to establish one-on-one meetings with each person, even if they weren't directly being supervised by myself. And I felt that it was a good way to just, of course, build that relationship. And one of the ways that we continue, they're stable and consistent, but they do evolve. So about once a year, I try to connect and ask questions like, is this amount of time that we're connecting, working? Should we do it more often, less often? And so everything that we're doing, there's some consistency and stability, but all of it is tweaked and changed a little bit. We do team celebrations. This past year, we had a team member who had 5 years of service, and we decided to do a little awards thing for them. And so basically, it was kind of like based off of the David Letterman, for those of you who know David Letterman, top 10 list. And so the team all came together to share what their top 10 things were about that person. And we had a party with food, because food is always important, where we gave them their award. We look to do field trips, things like that. I'm hoping that this winter we will go on a field trip to another institution and connect with other archivists in the state. We do casual things, casual conversations connecting at lunch, over coffee, going on walks. So a lot of different strategies to get at the relationship building. But it's really about building authentic and trusting relationships with individuals that in the team, that I think, as cheesy as it might sound, is really its own reward. The bonus about building these relationships is that the relationships built foster create positive mechanisms for employee and manager growth. It creates an environment of sustained communication and feedback. It builds rapport, helps develop a shared vision, improves collaboration, and from my experience, fosters more grace and empathy. So as changes continue to happen, or hard conversations we have challenges that we need to face, we do it together in a way that is respectful and takes people's people as people into mind. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of that organizational leadership and team development. So as kind of mentioned before, creating a space to focus on relationships and team building is really important, especially again, as change is constant. The more things that you can put in place that have some stability, I think helps navigate some of the change that comes around. And some of this team building and team development isn't focused or led by work related things. It's more fun, I hope. I mean, everyone in the department, you work 40 hours a week or more than that, and hopefully not, but you're at work more than you're anywhere else. And so it's really important, I think, to have a good environment and want to be around the other people that you work with. So we do a lot of work on that. Next thing I'll talk about real quickly is a little bit about communication and how transparency is also a critical practice that helps change. So it helps us face and embrace change in many ways. So the intentional decision-making and consistency related to transparency and communication are important. So still navigating, working through doing this well, but taking the time to establish your best practices and articulating them out to everybody helps provide that framework so that we all know we all are on the same page. And I'll just say, if you're a manager in any organization, most everyone is a middle manager. The middle just might look a little bit different depending on where you are in the organization. So establishing that documentation and practices that can be seen at the different levels, those above you, those that you're working with, those in other teams, helps provide some of that consistency. And I use it as an advocacy tool. Like, you can control the level of transparency that you provide to other external stakeholders, whether it's within your library or more broad. And it's a great mechanism for advocacy for your department. So here are some components we put into place. We established routine department meetings, including a structured agenda and a way to report out. For the team, that was recently, they recently reorganized, merged. It was really important to establish those routine meetings, like I've said, and baseline practices for those meetings to build awareness for our work internally and work towards becoming one unit. Like we came together so that we understood how we all fit together to move forward. The way we approach the meeting has changed over time as we continue to build those relationships and do more team development. But I want to quickly highlight that importance of reporting out. And every place may have it a little bit differently. You might have staff meetings that are more routine. You might have monthly reports that go out. VCU libraries, we have an internal blog that's part of the organizational culture. And so for me, it became really apparent really quickly that it was a mechanism to advocate and promote the department through the meeting minutes. So we've been intentional about how we craft our minutes to be shared out for that advocacy piece and information sharing. We did so for our vision and strategic planning as well. So I'm gonna back up just a second and say, like, normally I don't know that it's the best strategy to come into a department and make lots of changes without knowing a lot, right? But because of all the changes that had been happening in special collections and the merger, staff turnover, there was so much change and upheaval that it really felt critical to create something consistent that guided us, that we all saw how we fit into this bigger course of action. And so for me, that was creating a departmental vision and strategic plan. So after about 5 months, I started talking to the leadership team I had at that time, and then brought it to the entire team for conversation. And we started by working collaboratively to establish a team vision. We had a document that had preceded me that we used as a baseline, and then we built conversations and worked from that. And this really gave us our guiding principles, which allowed us to start to work in a collaborative space. And articulate our goals and objectives together. And the process, as we did the vision and we did the strategic plan, it was, again, like I said, very collaborative, and it was I can't even speak now. Something that we crafted over time and put a lot of intent and thought into. So from the beginning of the thought of it to the end of the process is about a year long process. And I wanted to finish that off with a retreat for us. And I wanted it to be a way to thank everyone for all the work that had been put in, and for people to have a time to reflect on what the past year and all the change had been about. But I also wanted it to be not all about work. So we went to Maymont in Richmond, where we got to interact with animals like that cute goat and walk around the beautiful gardens and just spend time hanging out together. And there was food, so we could eat together. The next piece I want to talk about a little bit is continual growth. Alluded to this before, but I'm always learning and growing to the best of my ability. And as I've reflected on where we have come to this place, as I've worked on this presentation with Margaret, it really has allowed me to reflect and think about more growth opportunities for myself and for the team. It's really hard to do the reflection and spend any time on any of this stuff, and I don't get to spend as much time, and I'm sure Margaret doesn't get to spend as much time as we would like to on this, but try to find places to be intentional about it where I can. So I've tried to infuse it into my goals and my yearly, like work plans. So I put it into my professional effectiveness. I put it into my scholarship. I put it into my service, so that I can do it as part of my job, because my job is to manage people and I want to do that well. And so I want to have support within the library to do so. So I've done a lot of professional development and different leadership trainings. You always can seek out, there's lots of opportunities, I think. Different institutions, different organizations will have, internal trainings that sometimes can happen. There are programs like hers. I just did this thing called Leading from the Middle. It was a 5-time workshop through the Higher Education Resource Services. And I've said before, like, even if, those things cost money and it's harder to do, and luckily I have support from my institution, but there's other ways to do this, right? You can, do some research into different models. Like, I've really been interested in the appreciative inquiry model, thinking about different ways to build and leverage mentorship and professional relationships. So that is one way that I've been able to do that. So I'm a mentor for SAA, and my mentees always teach me so much. And I have mentors from being a member of the Archives Leadership Institute, which I just want to give a plug, because UVA is hosting the Archives Leadership Institute for the next couple of years, and applications are open. And it was a really transformative experience for me. that has really helped shape me. I also lean on former bosses. I lean on colleagues here and at other places. And so there's just lots of different opportunities that are free and that also, you know, cost money that hopefully your institution can support that I recommend. Margaret.
Yes, and I will pop in here just to say that I too have been looking for ways to improve my leadership skills before. Well, actually, it was during some of this change. I actually was able to do a Leadership Institute training here at BCU, which was really helpful because it's the first time I'd ever really sat down and thought about what it means to be a leader and what my values are and um, what aspects I wanted to develop. And so I have that as a base. And then I've also done my own reading and trying to seek out resources and also just paying attention to the people around me and the different ways that they lead and interact. And that has been very helpful. And I am definitely working on my active listening, which is not easy, but I'm trying more and more. And I'm trying to also be a more transparent communicator. And I would also say that we like to support our colleagues within the department to improve their skills and also take the opportunity to try new things and find ways that they want to improve, whether it just be their work skills. If they want to try some more things to help build their leadership skills, we are also trying to encourage that as well.
Yeah, and we built that into the strategic plan as well, growth opportunities for the team, so that we could do this work intentionally and support one another, and it be seen as an important aspect of our work. So opportunities and some outcomes. So, you know, coming into this setting where there was lots of change, I did try to learn and understand the environment to the best of my ability during the time that I've been here. And while I'll never have been able to have walked in the shoes of the people who have had to experience all of this change, through the team building, relationship building, the strategic planning, all this collaborative effort, you know, I took that information I was collecting and tried to find paths that would turn these challenges into opportunities and outcomes. So the first thing that we really did was some documentation. And one opportunity that clearly presented itself due to this enormous amount of staff turnover was the creation of documentation. We are fortunate to still have a mix of longtime employees coupled with new employees, and that's been able to help us infuse knowledge, expertise, and insights into creating or building off the documentation that existed.
So one of the things that we undertook was a processing manual. That's something that myself and another one of my colleagues, Jessica, who has also been here for a while, have wanted to do for a long time. We had a wiki that had a lot of good documentation for how we do processing in the department, but there was still a lot of practices that were unwritten and just kind of locked up in our heads. So having a new processing archivist come on board and also university archivist, it was a great time for us to take on this project with Crystal's support. We paused processing for 6 months so we could really focus and dig in and take the time that we needed to craft a manual, which will save us time in the future when onboarding and also makes it easier for us now because we have so much stuff documented. When we are stumped or like, what do I do next? You can just go straight to that document and have that help. So that's been really great.
Yeah, and then we worked on collection development policy. You know, a lot of those folks who left us were knowledge keepers, you know, 160 something years of institutional knowledge. You know, they had been instrumental in the donor relations and collecting. So about a year of absorbing and learning for myself, for new team members, for folks that were new to different roles. I crafted a draft policy using existing knowledge and documentation, looking at our peer and aspirants, looking at Virginia repositories, looking at SAA, and created that draft and then sought departmental and stakeholder feedback. And we revised as a team as needed, and then we sent it off for approval, which luckily happened.
And then there is legacy department information. I actually started a document in anticipation of my supervisor's retirement, and also because I knew that we were going to have so many new folks coming in. And I had scattered documentation notes around, and then again, things that I just knew from being here over the years. So I turned it into a document with a timeline of the department, about some of the major milestones, things that people would need to know, details about some of our past practices, like old accessioning formats, things of that nature, and information about the various platforms that we use, like Archive Space, Omeka, um, anything like that. And then also, when my supervisor was getting closer to retirement, we had these sessions that we called HSL 101, where we walked through all of our spaces and we're taking notes and asking questions. And it was basically a brain dump of everything that she could tell us. And it was really great because some of these things I knew, but I needed some reminders of. And then for the folks that were new and had never heard these things, it was very helpful for them to get a sense, because having somebody who was here for 45 years suddenly leave is that is huge. So and thankfully she's still around, so I can still ask her questions, but I have to ask her far fewer now because of the information that I was able to glean from her.
Yeah, and then we've done a student internship manual so that we all are on the same, we do all this because it's diffused across different people. So we have the same process and ethos around it. So for this one, we asked for volunteers, and I asked folks whose roles already aligned or had supervised already to help participate in crafting the documentation. This one we weren't pausing our work on. We're not hiring new students until next fall. So we did find ways to slow the process down because we were doing all our other work at the same time. So as a group, we decided what the timeline would be, crafted our outcomes, our outline, and have separated the work across different semesters. Another aspect and approach was related to reorganization and recrafting of job descriptions. So, one of the most important aspects, I think, of trying to turn a negative, all the great people leaving, into an opportunity was recrafting the department and the positions. Relied on the strategic plan, the folks to make these decisions. But of course, I had to work within the constraints of our monetary resources as well. So we were able to hire a full-time university archivist and another position, arts collections curator positions. They're both important collecting scopes for us. Because of resources we couldn't hire at the level that we had or with all the parts that there had been. So we were very intentional about paring it down to be not other duties as assigned. And so it's allowed these individuals and these roles to really focus in on what their jobs actually are, rather than just it being a portion of their position. And then we were very lucky because as the university archivist retired, they had many hats. They had been the leader of the department, and they also were instrumental in the curator of the health sciences, which is a big scope for us as well. So we really had the opportunity to promote from within. Thank goodness Margaret was willing to take it on. I mean, she's amazing. She's an amazing archivist, amazing leader. She's a great mentor. And so it was a no-brainer to promote from within. And I really wanted to rebuild that leadership group that I had at VCU. And so we made that happen. We did some realigning of job descriptions as well. And we recrafted a staff position to make it a research and collections coordinator, which has allowed us to make a staff leader position within the department. So I think we will just go to the takeaways since I want us to have time for questions. So takeaway, change always happens. Finding ways to sit with that and then making the strategic decisions at the right time involving the right people is important.
And trying doesn't mean that it has to be permanent. You can try anything. You can call it a pilot and see how it works. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, go back to the drawing board. It's very good to be flexible.
Yeah. And then to reiterate, reevaluate and find places to do those small corrections to stay on task. being a responsible manager is never done, and so change and the tweaks you need to make are never done either. Thanks. So I think we will open it to questions.
All right, thank you to our presenters. That was awesome. We do have some questions in the queue. The first one is for Crystal and Margaret. During times of change, it really ends up causing duties to get divided amongst the remaining staff. I noticed you have a lot of different titles in the department. How did you manage the distribution of duties between different positions and still keep the positions clearly defined during times of staff shortages and turnover? For example, how did you differentiate between the duties of collections archivist and processing archivist when or if they had to take on additional duties?
That's a great question. So I will say that some of it, with some of the change, we did things like, and coming into a new phase of the COVID pandemic to endemic or whatever, we changed our hours on our desk. We closed for a day, like we had been closed, and we reopened, and we just whittled it down a little bit so that some of the duties that we were like, we tried to find ways, I think, to stop certain things that needed to happen or change the way things happen so that people can continue to do the work that they needed to get done. And we just put some other things on the back burner and like, yeah, I mean, I think some things were distributed. I don't know, Margaret, you might want to
Yeah. Well, like with the collections archivist and the processing archivist, the collections archivist was also called a processing archivist, but we realized that that was not reflective of the work that they were doing. They were doing so much more than that. They were doing collection, conservation. They were doing exhibits and outreach and some other things. And we decided on changing the name that was more encompassing of the role that they were doing, and so that we could have some definition between the person whose primary role is to process, and then this archivist who does processing, but also does some other things wrapped up within it. And so it's not, processing is not their main focus anymore.
The next question is for Anastasia. What resources did you use to find the open source lesson plans? Do you have any favorite recommendations?
Yeah, good question. So I honestly started with just researching on the internet, OER Commons, and I'll put it in there, oercommons.org is a great place to, oh no, that's not me. Hold on. Here it is. Oh, I said I would answer live and now it's not letting me type an answer. I'll put it in the chat. So in any case, yeah, that's a great place to go. And let me just paste it in there while I'm thinking of it. I have noticed too that a lot of universities have open educational resources. So I know I want to say New York State, like the different departments of education have open ed resources. A lot of universities do. So I wouldn't say that I have a favorite. I've looked at quite a few different ones and just kind of found what suited me. And again, when I was creating these lesson plans, I went to several different ones, found ones I liked, and sort of pieced it together because it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but they all had portions of it that I thought were really valuable. UNESCO has one, if you're doing anything that you think would apply with that. There's different foundations that have them. So yeah, just start doing some research. But OER Commons is a really good one, and that was a big help when I was creating lesson plans, I do have to say. So definitely would recommend that.
And we have another question for Margaret and Crystal. Did the new staff coming into the department bring different perspectives that led to any changes in your work or department?
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely are who we are as a unit, and everyone's strengths and abilities and styles come into play. So I would say yes, but I also say that like having the framework that we have with the strategic plan like allows everyone to to have the different perspectives and participate in crafting our way forward. But yeah, I will say that, you know, that it definitely has changed, but for the better. And as we're working on the student manual, for example, like we're doing a lot of work with just the ethos around the department and our cultural our cultural style. And I think it's going to like be the kickoff for us to think about setting some cultural norms and expectations around how we work together as a group that will be the driving ethos, and then everyone's personalities and new people coming in have that framework, and then they will take their strengths and continue to reimagine our work.
And I can definitely say that people have brought in new things. I mean, first of all, Crystal, you know, coming in as a new department head, bringing lots of ideas. Like for instance, we didn't have a strategic plan before. We did get together and we would talk about departmental goals and things we wanted to see, but we did not intentionally sit down and create like the strategic plan that we now have in place and that we can update as we need to and have an idea of what we're going to focus on for each year. And knowing that it's okay to set some things on the back burner. And I adored all the people that I worked with for all those years prior to the new people that have come into the department. But there has been a change kind of in the energy and how we were just constantly running from one thing to the next to the next. And I'm not saying that we don't still do that in some ways, but the fact that we've been allowed to stop and take the time we need to craft the policies, procedures, and workflows that we need to be foundational. And so things like the processing manual and this new manual for student work and other things that I'm sure will be coming out soon for us. It's really nice. It's nice to be able to take that time and to be more intentional instead of just careening from one thing to the next, which is what I felt like I was doing for a while. So that's been really nice, and it's been a change. I think that has been really positive out of all of this, because it has been a bit of a roller coaster having been through all of it for all this time, but we're coming out, I think, stronger on the other side, which is always great.
And I'd just like to add to that really quickly too. I know we're running out of time here, but that's one of the things, like I was saying in my presentation, to when these opportunities come up or these changes come up, to to set those boundaries and decide what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and be very intentional about it, because that makes all the difference. Instead of reacting right away and saying, oh no, I can't make that change, or no, I can't do that, step back and realistically look at what you can and cannot do. And sometimes you do need policies to put that into place, and that's super helpful to have that framework.
Okay, we had comment. Thank you all to the presenters for these insightful presentations. And two more questions, and then we'll have to end it because we're right at time. Crystal and Margaret, can you speak a little about the less fun side of change management and leadership? How do you handle things like resistance to change, employees who aren't used to oversight, and performance issues?
So the first thing I'll say is we're very lucky because we haven't had any of those challenges. So it does make doing this a lot easier. And I think that's one of the reasons we're so successful. But I would say for those places, and not that it's not hard and it hasn't, but having that leadership group, like having Margaret to be able to talk through some of these things when they came up, to come up with strategies. So we're not doing it in a vacuum, but then really about being clear and direct, and having those lines of communication with individuals. And if you have to do the things on the performance plan, you do the things on the performance plan. But I try to look at it as like finding out what people's strengths are, and then like kind of tailoring to it so that you can find strategies to try things in a more positive way than a negative way, if that makes sense. Sorry, I know we're running out of time, so I'm being quick.
Yes, and sorry, because Crystal and I took way longer than we thought we would.
Yeah.
But I'd just like to say that one important thing when something's happening, because I will say that we have issues from our larger university organization where things aren't always hunky-dory, that I think it's just really important to acknowledge what people are feeling and say, yeah, this isn't great, but try to control what we can, what's within our sphere of influence, often helpful, and to try and let go of what we can't change. It's hard to stay positive when something comes from outside forces within the administration or anything else. But I do think acknowledging it and talking about it, and then having control over the things we can't control, is very helpful.
Yeah, and I will just add to that, I've joined some of the Society of American Archivists, their groups, and like the solo archivist section, and I did get a lot of support from them, because you end up sometimes, if you have no one to bounce ideas off of, and people are asking you to do things and you're not really sure if that's how this should go, or you feel a resistance to it, then I could go on there and chat with people and go, okay, you know, I am kind of on the right page, or no, maybe I should think about it this way instead. So that's helpful too if you don't have anybody at your organization that you can lean on. There are you know, different groups that you can join out there that are really helpful. And like Merrick has the what do they call, the mentor and mentee program. So that's always nice too. So it's out there. You just have to find it.
And Merrick's really great for that. I will say, like, we're in a virtual conference obviously right now, but one of the things I absolutely love about in person is I get to talk to people and find out that so many people are struggling with the same things that I am, and I can get ideas and make some connections there and find a network that can help. And if you haven't done that, I encourage you to do so.
Okay, and with that, we thank you all for attending this awesome presentation, and thank you again to our presenters.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.